The main text that Geshe will be teaching is Kunsang Lam Shelung by Dza Patrul Rinpoche. This is known as Words of My Perfect Teacher in English. It's a beautiful commentary based on the Longchen Nyingtik teachings of Kunken Jigme Lingpa. So that's going to be the main teaching, but also along with that is going to be a teaching on the Amitayus Sutra. So in terms of the first text that Geshe begins with today, because we all need long lives to receive the teachings and also an accumulation of merit to receive the teachings, he'll start with the Amitayus Sutra today, and then we'll do the beginning parts of Patrul Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher. But I imagine as we go on in subsequent weeks, the first part of the teaching will be Words of My Perfect Teacher. I'm not going to introduce it this time, but also as this is a text of the Nyingma tradition, I thought maybe it's nice if we recite the 7-line prayer and the mantra of Guru Rinpoche Oma Hum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung at the beginning of these teachings. So I'm going to put a text together for that, and maybe we can start that in subsequent weeks. In terms of the other teachings that are happening, we had a teaching at the library yesterday on a general topic about establishing mental peace and happiness. So that's available online if you missed that. And then going forward, we will have a commentary on Chakra Samvara for those of you who are following teachings, and that those teachings, and that will be on the 23rd. And then as we come into April, I imagine we'll have a session on Vajrayāna as well as continuing with these teachings on Words of My Perfect Teacher. On the 13th, this is the anniversary of the passing away of our co-founder and dear Guru Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And so then in honor of his passing, Geshe will be transmitting a text known as the Jambel Tsenje, the Chanting the Names of Manjushri, which has been recommended for Rinpoche's quick rebirth. So a lot of people missed that particular transmission and asked, will Geshe be giving that again? So that will be happening on the 13th of April. More details will be forthcoming. And I think that's about it for announcements. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, make yourselves comfortable. I'll invite Geshe down and we'll get started. Sorry about that. So hi everybody. So Dave, I know this is short notice, so my apologies, but If you have this Prayers to Guru Rinpoche booklet somewhere on your laptop, Geshe would like to chant that this time. If people are like at home and you have access to Google, just look up the 7-line prayer and you'll be able to find it.
Yes, sir.
What do you say? Yeah,
Yeah, kanga chiro kanga tashi dele yapoko de.
So can everybody hear Geshe-la's voice all right? Okay, great. The sound is, I try to see the sound as a learning journey. It's different each time, but today it's good, so that's good. Listen again.
Oh, ya ta chiro kanga tashi dele kanga lojo donyole kanga ta yor pashi gitare wachimboyos.
So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to all of the Dharma friends. Geshe hopes you are well and happy, and in particular, that your listening and studying of the Dharma is getting better and better.
Oh, ta ngarosu kanga ta ndi chine lekache de ate zo te ta pege se dinela ta kadi yinayo kanga ta chujuni zute chazoma mebazo ya ndeba yoba. Ta deshi ta nika ge deshi ta tu ge deshi kanga pege tembochi ge yo ai ta di chedenganzu lekache yo res.
So we're gathered together today connected with that basic wish, right? Which is that basic wish that all beings share to even considering the smallest suffering to the biggest type of suffering, to completely get rid of that, and considering the smallest happiness to the greatest happiness, to be able to achieve that, right? So this is the part of the reason we gather today.
Ta tendriga pake soma nujin ya te ta shi nense dundewa teze du yoare te ina yu zo te ta nongi se dunda dewa chimboji yoai za ta te pake tem ya bo yu che res.
And so, of course, this happiness and suffering, on one level, they're related to the external conditions, the things outside of us. But actually, the most important thing to consider is the internal conditions. We understand that really suffering and happiness are related to the internal conditions, particularly as they are connected with our mind.
Ta se tsumacha se tana kadina kiwo se matawa ina ta kadina koropage
So once the mind is purified and becomes unconfused, we will have that stable basis for happiness. As long as the mind is not purified, that confusion will remain, and the cycle and difficulties of samsara will continue. So, in terms of this process of purifying our mind, what are the main roots of that practice? What are the branch practices that we need to engage in to help move that along? We should have a clarity of these on these topics. So it's a little bit like, at least if you're in southern Ontario, where it's a very cloudy day, our mind at the moment is like that. And because of the clouds of our confusion, we can't see the vast expanse, the sky-like mind. And so the thing is that the mind will remain confused, the mind will remain obscured if we just leave things as they are, if we don't engage in any kind of cultivation towards change. And so, just like when the sky is free of clouds, its nature is something vast, expansive, and luminous. In the same way, when our mind is purified of its turbidities, its nature is something vast and illuminated. So the sky free from So water free from any particles becomes clear, and we can see to the ocean's depths. In the same way, our mind free of clouds.
센저롱질라 녀모고 베다 드마메바 대도 오지바지레스.
So that kind of pure, clear water where we can see the bottom is just like our mind when it is cleared of the clouds of the adventitious stains or afflictions.
오다 던지지 이자 세자 첨부 던지지 가로서요. 이자 다 가로서 뽑아지는 가체야. 오다 가워지는 가체야. 다 지세 몸보지 다 딜이야레스.
So then, understanding something of our true nature, this can give us some bravery, some determination and confidence as we continue in our practice.
다 드리나요. 조조다게서 주바침비 당간서 다 로조도 녀래 지요. 다 던지게 뚜바지를 시 둬야 돼요. 이제 조 딜이야레스.
So, actually, the text that we're looking at today, Words of My Perfect Teacher, it is connected with a type of teachings known as the Great Perfection, Dzogpa Chenpo. And the realization of Dzogchen is possible because the fundamental nature of the mind is pure and luminous, as Geshe just explained.
오다 던지지랜드 사 던지지 이자 다 대포게 셀 포게 로조도 녀래 아버지 용하셔 바라다 리셀 헬레지 그 생간종이야 년도 헬레티스.
And because to study and practice these teachings and reach an understanding effectively, we need to have a calm and relaxed mind. We're just going to begin with an exercise to still the body and the mind.
멜론 하다바 노지 시바라바 강가 사 온싱하나 수베다 세강가 다지 지든녀라 드네 리세 샤와진 데기 소마지.
So think just as you breathe ha onto the surface of a mirror and that condensation goes into one point and then completely disappears, think that we are bringing in our consciousness from all the outflows of the 5 sense doors and so forth, that we bring it in to the center, and with this focus the body and mind become still and relaxed.
세게 노아카르 이나 파지자바 이나다 안조 레카자바 노지 네 리세 샤와지도 다 레레 요바치다 라체고요레스.
And so as we set aside any appearance that may be arising in the mind, just as we would set aside a certain task or object, in this way the mind's nature is revealed and we come into a state of peace.
세코로가다 냐친다보데바 이가를 타브게 따와 이나요 리도바 샤도바 오늘 것이 더야가다 로시진데스.
And because of the mind's fundamental nature, any object or phenomena that it wants to understand, it can cognize and understand. It can come to knowledge.
네스카르 이나 시 토야가 콜을 중지지야 이자 마시바 강가 과 토야가 다 로시진데스.
Because the mind has the power to come to know or understand anything, all of the confusion that arises from lack of knowledge can be completely cleared away.
마시바 강가 과 토야 이자 텔라데니 슈이다 마리바 저는 저다더니 열화 강가 매워서 토야거든요 로시진데스.
as we clear away this unknowingness, the root affliction of ignorance and all of its branches can be cleared away.
Yes, the DGI is a longe tattoo pattern, yes, a zuba chimbo, so she be Zavado Yala Kanga, and a longe Yala Kanga Shetaka,
Because the nature of the mind is thus, then the teaching of the great perfection, Dzogpa Chempo, this is something that can be brought forth and realized within our mind.
Dona Rono Sosing in the Tal, Saint Nipa Yuzuya Mayagatal, Leka Pasubas Chigitale, Shala, the Mozapan Rono.
Therefore, my task is to nourish those fundamental potentials within my mind so that realization manifests. In order to do this, with single-pointed focus, I request the holy beings for their blessings. So, we'll begin with the praise to Buddha Shakyamuni as we usually do. Then we'll do the prayer to Guru Rinpoche and continue with the short mandala and finally refuge and bodhicitta.
Sheba Dachomba Yondaba Zobe Zonje Reba Don Shazo Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Jemba Chebo Doye Kalo Jowa Lana Meba Ladon Minongi Demba Sonje Joden De Begyawa Shaja Dubala Chazelo Jede Kyazu Ji Temba Chonden De Teje Jeba Dachomba Yondaba Zobe Zonje Reba Don Shazo Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Jemba Chebo Doye Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Ladon Minongi Demba Sonje Chonden De Jawa Shaja Dubala Chazelo Jede Kyazu
So we'll recite the 7-line prayer to Guru Rinpoche. Ong Hogen Yogin Ojonsom Pema Gesayadom So we'll do the short mandala and then refuge and bodhicitta. Soji refuge and bodhicitta. Somebody gave us some beautiful orchids, so I took Geshe as usual. We have a small plastic flower, but he likes to use that for the mandala. Sorry about that.
Chidon Tsoke Chenam Lai Janju Bada Dani Gyasu Ji Dagi Cheje Jibe Sunangi Drola Beje Sonje Droba Shu Sonje Chidon Tsoke Chenam Lai Janju Bada Dani Gyasu Ji Dagi Cheje Jibe Sunangi Drola Beje Sonje Droba Shu.
오야 다 두다니를 샤와니 다데 가침부터는 이지듯이 먹어 다데
So, as always, we mention the activities at the beginning and the end, and no need to repeat that these are of particular importance.
다 무르파토이는 저 somba jowa tatu 세레타 레카 카르리나 텐디 운네서 바 모저그니 이제 somba jowa tatusen 어디리 오케제 요아레스.
We can also think of the foundation of the Agonda Sampa Jorwa Tartuk
시 somba
Sampa
jowa
Jorwa Chatuk, of the foundation, the initial thought, the actual action, and the completion. That's another way to think of it.
다 때께자 로마가지 다 간가 안들다 요와 니전 주의서도 다 같이 뭐다 때문에 야수서 때문에 이 somebody.
Or we can think of the preparations, the actual activity, and the activities at the end.
다 지세 가르레서나 되는 대화이나래 둥아이나래 곧 기바라와서 로토테 아니 저 tempo 예멜라 때니 아니 대화 tempo 저 두자 tempo 예멜라 때니 강에 치와 된 거야.
So why is this important? Well, it relates to an understanding that happiness comes from the congruent causes, and that suffering comes from the congruent causes. If the causes that we accumulate towards happiness are not complete, then that happiness is not going to be steady and long-lasting. Similarly, if the causes of suffering that we accumulate are complete, then that suffering will be stable and long-lasting.
다 텐주게 내서 다 대할래야 스지 건조와 또 뭐더 다 할래야 다 내서 지요하레스.
So this is related to the fundamental teaching of Tenjung, of dependent arising, and this is something based in reason that cannot be refuted.
다 저돈 지부 텀바지 그거래 마도 마텀비 jel라테네 tani 저 마텀바 저질라 저돈 지부니 마텀바스 요나 다 tani 따다 지무시고 말해 당간조 조지데레스.
So for a particular result to manifest, it must come about from a congruent cause. We cannot expect a result if the causes that we accumulate are incongruent, if they are contrary or do not match up.
다 체리 깨라 첨보래 되네 이나에 체리 그 거로 증거 돈번이를 되네 점 같은 바지라 되는 리본 같은 바지인데 자가 요아이자 대그 건설 강에 지금.
So Geshe said one of the drawbacks of science is in that in his opinion, of course there are many sophisticated understandings, but the initial hypothesis of how things came to be is actually not in accordance with this teaching. So in other words, they are proposing a result that doesn't exactly match up with the cause that they talk about.
다 짓지라 되는 리본 뭐 유나치 다 걸어서 또 뭐는 거주 차와 이자 닐 저와 되는 가지고 가디이나 깔카워서 그래서 걸어서 그라기 알았어.
So then they are proposing one sort of fundamental cause or beginning that leads to many multifarious results. And actually, when in different dialogues, when Buddha asks them about this, they do say that those questions are hard to give answers to, hard to give explanations to.
어떤데 들어가서 말다. 아주 샤왕아시리야고 jet탐바지라 되는 리본 탐바지 요그가 요아이자 샤왕아마 슈마리야고 리파 조지디니 비와레스.
And in fact, this is one of the key reasonings of why we assert past and future lifetimes, right? The life that we enjoy now as a result, this must arise from a previous cause that is similar to the result that we are experiencing. In the absence of such a cause, it doesn't make much sense.
다 주하고 그러와.
Zukdrajiro.
주 단에 주거든요. 저쪽에서는 예래전에라 세 시바세 하지 못하고 말해. 나세 하지 못하고 요 말해. 대토고 매아이자 땅 알아서 아미 코파는 또뭐 여기 가가 세대도 나텔 때 정가마지 그거 디와스.
So if you are just positing human life as beginning at form, if you are positing something material, positing something that has form as the substantial cause, then that doesn't match up with the result that we have of the self and my mind. And it does give an explanation of perhaps how the physical constituents are in the mother's womb, but it doesn't explain how the self and that we call the mind enters into the mother's womb.
하고서 다 되면 다 투사지셔 다 거서라 다 알게 좀 못하는 근데요 다 대지 같이 뭐래 손도게야.
Yeah, so that's one thing that is important for us to reflect on and think about.
어떤지 당연도 끊어거니까 이사 끊어야보 지시 따발라 다 오세 류마테가 그런 거라 보게 아버지네 그 아이다 달래서 이스.
So then in the beginning to establish this motivation, we prepare the ground of the mind by tapping into its nature of neutral equanimity.
좀 maybe 선스간지 지어봐이네 다 지냐만도 지파자고요 선바지.
So set aside any thoughts that are not benefiting you, any distractions. Think that they melt away just as the moisture in the sky is evaporated by the sun.
세도 다 리크 롱제 가와 다와 이나요다 노아 노진 저기 주사 매바 롱지 매바지 소바다
Think self, others, or any external object. They have an appearance of some sort of pinpointable essence, but if we were to try to seek that essence, we would not be able to find it.
tumbating one sanamandu tan de jono kalata ne pusu tsuba ane yuju pusu tsuba ji ge denata suje choden de zo shipedre Dza Patrul suba aro suga ta ni to jibe lama kanga ta koni juyo suba.
And so, as we contemplate this from this sphere of emptiness, imagine that a beautiful jeweled ground manifests, in the center of which is a beautifully ornamented throne, upon which sits Buddha Shakyamuni, and then in front of him are Dza Patrul Rinpoche, together with the lineage and actual lamas of this tradition.
ronga yayalan ro ri tu senje yuzu ta dewa chimi goneta shasun to ta tembo chiyo suba.
And on either side of us are a mother and father, and behind us the vast assembly of all 6 types of sentient beings, but in human form. And imagine that they look up towards this field of accumulation with a mind of faith and refuge.
Lama teta ta dunjan tana shaye teta twinyenbi gone tukane ge de zege ze chabamba mano ngaro sunma tani ta lenge kanga ta so
And imagine that from the heart of Buddha Shakyamuni, as well as the lineage lamas and retinue, beautiful light rays and nectars emanate, and that these fall like a rain of blessings upon the assembly of sentient beings.
lojo do nyole kani chisomba noji tara page she toya ta te tsuma pusuwa ji ta chaso so.
And think through these blessings and all of the study and practice that I wish to accomplish. These blessings have given me the foundation to be able to actualize that.
소소 이나요 다 세계 대도하게 제도 손지지 공부다 마토파다 로조도 nyole 때문에 손베도니 다 전주주세요.
And then bring forth the bodhicitta mind, thinking that until I am able to achieve complete enlightenment, Buddhahood, the optimum way to benefit sentient beings, for their sake I will continue to study and practice uninterruptedly.
물린들 신체 요주가 대소는 도시 shum바 대지지 shum바 가와서
To be able to receive these blessings, to actualize the essence of this human life, which is to benefit all sentient beings, I am extremely fortunate. So reflect on the good fortune with joy. So we'll pause there.
다 간로 땡겐다 냥냥로 다 간로 땡도 제 계세지 다 간존 로도 다 드리 아니 다 손님이 세지 매 이만이 봐. 대지만이 봐. 그절라미 샬리테 드링 엘리스. 다 드링 안저 다 로주도 녀레 때모 용하셔 봐라. 아니 물리 대차 무센데 템버지 그거 아이자. 아니 대우지래. 아니 대전도 맞아 다저 천도 수기 걸어. 템비도 보순이 줘된데 이자 다 드링 엘 된로기 이스테세.
So then, as we go forward with this series, Geshe said that normally what he will do is begin with his commentary on Dza Patrul Rinpoche's words of my perfect teacher, and then continue with the Amitayus Sutra, or the Unfathomable Exalted Life and Transcendental Wisdom Sutra. However, because in order to be able to actualize the teachings, we need a long lifespan, which is free from obstacles, in addition to the fact that this sutra was spoken by the Buddha himself, on the first day of the sutra, we will begin actually with this Amitayus Sutra.
어따데 로로소소를 찾아봐 이날에 저는 로로소소가 다 보게 되는 약간가 오늘 더 달게요. 소소가 다 니도 집다 니도 세치면 되와 아니 소소가 다 라마 유효바이나 대지 그세 대라는 거다 소소가 다다 조지 저거 아래스 샤데.
And also another thing Geshe said, that if you have chosen a spiritual teacher, then actually the recitation of this particular sutra for his or her longevity, for their long life, is considered a very effective practice.
다 로로소소 다짜짜짜 친구 저거 아이자 돈번터니 테마 빼나 다 라마소이네 테마 써서래. 그 가시가 테마가 다 니만이 말데 기들이 뭐요 아래스.
And so seeing their spiritual teachers as important, many lamas or kind of realized spiritual beings, for the sake of their teacher living long, they recite this sutra sometimes 3 or sometimes 5 times each day.
다 닌데미깔 다 나로서 다니 소소자 체체다네 또 뭐네 소소 체던데 여보시라야 말해.
Yeah, so we begin that with that sort of motivation, with the understanding that if we're kind of reciting it for our longevity, for our kind of benefit right from the beginning, maybe that's not the best initial impulse.
다 야쇼테 다로 소소 다 라미야 어때 양에도 집이 라마탄이 유요나 어다 뒤에 그세 템바도 다 보게 다 But actually,
if we recite it with this motivation that I am reciting this for the longevity of my direct spiritual teachers, as well as any of the lineage lamas who may still be in this world, and I am reciting it for this reason, actually, as you recite it with that motivation, you accumulate very good causes for your own longevity and merit. So if you do it for the lamas, if you're doing a couple of recitations, you can do like the first recitation for the lamas, right? The spiritual teachers, and the second and third recitation for your own longevity and merit. So I just wanted to say that there are several different editions. Sorry, I'm just for English language people following. There are several editions of translation in English of this sutra. One is available on Lotsawa House, which I just found yesterday. One is available through 84,000, which Manoshi was kind enough to post. But the principal recitation that we'll be relying on is the one from FPMT, which was actually translated by our late founder, Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And so we'll be using this. And you'll notice that sometimes the words are unusual, like virtue beggar, for example. So what does virtue beggar mean? This means bhikshu. So what Rinpoche has done is he has taken the actual etymology of the Tibetan word that is used for the Sanskrit bhikshu, and that actually gives you quite a nice gloss of the meaning. So this is the translation that I'll be using, and I hope people enjoy. But if it's helpful, also refer to those other translations as well. Gonda. So, and then in terms of the text of the words of my perfect teacher, Geshe was very fortunate in that he was able to receive the entire Lung oral transmission of the text of words of my perfect teacher, as well as the commentary in completion from His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama.
다 대도 뇽돌 세니 가서도 뇽돌 되는 안주 잔일라 다 비티스마 다르살라 다 할레빅들 가서 무시소스.
And in addition to that, His Holiness also touched on a related text known as the Mind in Comfort and Ease. And so Geshe also received that transmission in completion.
대도 뇽돌 하기와서지라. 대도 뇽돌 때네 야 로베르 무치러와. 다 소시 비트네 때네 린제가 린제 디비고 뭐지 뇽돌 토야레스.
And so then along with that, at the conclusion of this teaching, related to the cycle, which Words of My Perfect Teacher comments on, His Holiness received the initiation of the assembly of Vidyadharas, or Rigzendupa, which is an empowerment tradition with Guru Rinpoche as the main figure, but also many other related beings, in addition to other initiations.
아니 어때 지보요 말했더니 다 망마더니 프랑스 나라달 근데 베베가래 다 이니 men지다 마고바나세나 만디라지 말 그졸라미 샬류근 거는 다 노진 거에 대해서도 여본도스네 다가
And also, when Geshe was one of the teachers at Nalanda Monastery, His Holiness the Dalai Lama instructed the teachers actually that it would be very good to teach beginning students of Buddhism based upon the text of Words of My Perfect Teacher. So that was a very clear instruction that Geshe received directly that he is very happy to implement.
So,
yeah, and in terms of this text of my Words of My Perfect Teacher, Geshe has taught it before when he was staying in the Netherlands, in Holland. So we will first begin with the Long Life Sutra.
So in
terms of the source of this sutra, it is the words, the instructions of the teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. So of course there is no source superior to this. Sengiten, yeah. Yeah. So then if we think of this sutra, we can think of it kind of in basically 4 sections. The first is the meaning of the name, then the prostration or homage, then the actual sutra, so the main body of the teaching, as well as the 4th, the conclusion. So when we speak about the name, then because this is a sutra rooted, of course, in the Buddhist tradition of India, the name is given first in Sanskrit, and then the Tibetan translators give the name in Tibetan. So this relates to the task of this relates to the task of the Dharma. This relates to the task of the Dharma kings. So although at certain times there were the teachings present in Tibet, they weren't there in sort of a very complete way. So the great Dharma kings of Tibet, they sent Tibetans to train as Lotsawas, to train as translators. They sent them to India, and they endured great difficulty to go there, to learn, and to bring back the teachings. And so also in a similar way, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has mentioned that really seeing that the best way to cultivate the inner causes of happiness was the teachings of Buddhism available in India. Then the Tibetans really took the Buddhism as it existed in the Indian tradition.
수분이실 빼다니다 저지
So they took their dharma from India, but then the Tibetans, also living in a very cold climate due to the altitude of the mountains, they needed clothes that would be able to keep the warmth of their body. So it is said that they took the tradition of their clothing from the country of Mongolia.
다 칼라셔도 배우다 정말이 좀 봐도 다 드니 뭐지도 요용하러 왔어. 다 디테일 내면라고 심보때 또 잠이 심뭐 다니 원래 요하이자 디니스자 빼다는 다 렘바라고.
So then, in terms of the food, the Tibetans had their own indigenous food, such as tsampa and so forth, but to kind of go beyond that limited diet, to add some other things, dumplings and so forth, they looked to the culinary tradition of China. So it is said that they took their tradition of food from China.
다 근데 다 그냥 레바 야포 돼지가 다 쇼리 메베토는 야가 강가 가와니 됐을 때 뭐를 얘기죠.
So with an unbiased mind, we could say the Tibetans looked to different countries to see kind of what things that they could offer to benefit the land.
다 아직까지 뭐 다 던지지 다 제시 단계 전제 대세 아주는 내서 써요. 그래서 제조와 제시어바 기바스는 내서
So when we talk about the title of the sutra, we have the translation of the title itself. Tambudi karire? So what we do?
다 단계 동보다 하고서 전제 대세 동보 들어와. 이 논론에 내서 써요. 그래서
Ale.
제조와
Jurwa. Yeah.
아니 제시어바
Shepasana?
시어바 지레르게 된다 안 된데래서
Ale. Yeah. Okay.
아니 기바
So then, in terms of the first part, which is the name, the first part dealing with the name can be divided into three sections: the translation of the name itself, the actual meaning of the words, and the necessity for that particular name or title.
다 대도 뭐 제조와 들어와 다 제적을 다 작게 공부도 싶지 백개 공부도 싶지 적어요. 다 대마 야가께 더 아야 아파르마다 아인자나 나마 아니 Vajrayāna Sutra.
So then it begins with the Sanskrit title, which is the Arya Paramitayurjnana, Nama Mahayana Sutra. Yeah, at one point in my life I took Sanskrit and gave up, so I try to pronounce it properly but fail every time. Geshe is like, Ngodrup and Dave really try to pronounce the Sanskrit, but Geshe just says it like in an easy way. He says that actually his Sanskrit is like the Sanskrit that was used in southern India, which incidentally is Nagarjuna's Sanskrit. So that's his joking. He really doesn't know Sanskrit well. Yeah, los. So then in Tibetan, Papa Tsedang Yeshe Padu Meba Shewa Japa Teba Chembudo. So in English we would say, I tried to do the little lilts like Geshe does when he reads the title. So as we would say in English, the Sutra of the Great Vehicle called Unfathomable Exalted Life and Transcendental Wisdom. Ale. So in terms of translating the meaning of the sounds or syllables, there seem to be two translations, ways of translating that. The first is kind of like a literal rendering of the Sanskrit syllables and the meaning. And then there is another one where, based upon an understanding of the actual meaning, the syllables seem to be able to be arranged perhaps in a more methodical order. Namoguru Manjugosha. Yeah.
that lujere na zo jegre laman jo meng lo shang za lo sene
Yeah.
dat nyawa tu sa
Yeah. Okay, so now I understand. So Geshe gave an example. So often we recite a line of homage to Manjushri saying Namo Guru Manju Goshaya. And then, but in Tibetan, they would say Lama Jampe Yangla Chagse Lo. So the order has been rearranged to convey the meaning in Tibetan. So you start with Lama, which is Guru, then you have Manjushri's name, and then you have the Namo, or the homage, the prostration at the end.
될 달로지세요. 하고 살아.
Yeah. So that's a meaning translation versus an exact order translation.
다 된다고도 다 아야는 봐봐.
Yeah. So Arya actually means a superior being.
근데 로지 남으시다.
Pagpa.
아빠를 마다 세는 빠더면 봐.
Paramita means unfathomable. Aparamita, unfathomable.
어떤 데우 달로지 되서 용도 와.
Loso.
아인자나 체도이 아이스를 다 체도로 야나 이시.
Ayur indicates life, and Jnana is what Lama Zopa Rinpoche is translating as transcendental wisdom, sometimes called exalted wisdom.
나마서는 시샤와스.
Shishawasana?
시샤와스는 데르들이 세으레.
Nama means kind of called or said to be.
데스와 마하서는 첨보 야나서는 대바.
Maha is great, Yana is vehicle, so the great vehicle.
Sutra서는 도로와.
So Sutra is, in Tibetan it's Do, we would say Sutra. So from a discourse of the Buddha.
다 알는데 와서 어다티 미미 같이 버르단 디 바차 제바지 저기 야래 손지가 치수비 가르다 단디 돈이 쓴 거요 알아봤어.
So actually the Sanskrit name is important for another reason, because it puts a very valuable imprint in the mind stream, because of course the language that the Buddha spoke this teaching in is said to be Sanskrit.
데스타테 베게다 파바체도 이제 빠다면 바시샤와 대화지민도.
So Sutra of the Great Vehicle, called Unfathomable Exalted Life and Transcendental Wisdom.
된저거 델체 좋아서 그래서 또 모든 도송아.
So then we've gone through the original title as well as the translation.
다네 같이 버르다 제시에바서는 제 된다를 가려야레스 티가.
So then what is the meaning of this?
다 데레 다 듣는 동보 파파세야 데레스.
So we see the word Arya, which is Pagpa in Tibetan.
파파세는 아까서와 아니 때때때마다 아까서도 하면 파파세는 면바지래요. 만다와 체와도 파소나.
Ale. So Arya means superior. In other words, that was once low has become high. So the higher one.
미미탄디님이 간절 거지 뭐요 하르다스. 빼나 나로서 이나요. 단다 소소시오로 왔어. 하고서와 다 갈래 론주시 또 많이 또 대응 요리요리는 또 많이 녀서도 또 소나 소소시오를 체와도 파.
So this is very important actually, because Arya indicates an exalted state. So right now we are not Pagpa, we are a sosokeo, which is an ordinary being. However, as we study and practice the teachings, we will develop an intellectual understanding of emptiness. And then after a certain point, we will have a direct, unmistaken realization of emptiness. At that time, we are no longer an ordinary being. We have become an Arya, exalted.
나로서 이나요. 다 단다 로조소 거기 다 쉬자야지 또 뒤텐더라 왔어. 갈래 파파 좋아서는 다 대신 이네 되는 저와 매비가 다 거기 대신 고주 차와레스.
And that's actually the main purpose of why we study and practice, because if we are able to reach this superior or Arya state, then we will begin to touch that real lasting happiness.
된디에서 치케주샤 니레 단단가도 차마동 니네 되야 말아.
And this also relates to when we talk about the three jewels of refuge, right? We say that the dharma is the actual refuge, but we haven't yet actually actualized that dharma within our mind.
다디에서 대테레 다 체동 체세나 체세나 리두세 단다 메이 리두세 가로서와.
So it's sedang ininganso Arya drosun ganso kauya tanda paramita rebe ayur rebe
말아
kauya
체 아유
ayur.
백개는 요반이다.
So now, okay, so Geshe is going from Sanskrit to Tibetan, so I'll try to piece it together. So we're now doing se, which in the Sanskrit should be the ayur.
미자게 노지선은 대화매가 처음으로 디시기요. 하고서와 다 알레 체드게 절레용 그래. 체세나 단단 가로서 메이 체세나 메이 리도 세 템보 대바시키고 다 내지기라 체세요.
So when we speak about se, this means life. So we are speaking about the sort of continuity of the human body and mind, like life in that sense.
그래서와 어다체 아니 이시에서나 다 노게 또봐 제바질레서나 다 이시세야 되네.
And then the next that comes in the Tibetan title is Geshe, and so that is Jinyanya. Geshe sana kare.
이시세는 노게 또봐 제바지 tumani ngesa to yanda wodo ata tnishu le sona ta te yi.
So Geshe exalted wisdom in the sense of the inner realizations, such as the direct realization of emptiness and so forth.
Oda ta tu de ta sonji liwa wa yi ta tu.
And the final manifestation of that unfathomable, of that transcendental wisdom is, of course, Buddhahood, full enlightenment.
Ta jene aparamata de jana tani yaga yo pa da me ba che du yi shi pa da me ba.
So aparamita ayurjana, aparamita indicates unfathomable, so that means without exhaustion, life and wisdom. We can understand like that.
Che du yi shi pa da me ba sere ta pe chene te gar se kan aro so tani lo yi len di ban ra bo tunga ja ma to ra bo chi se ya re che ja ma to ban ra bo chi.
So when we say unfathomable life and transcendental wisdom, unfathomable means limitless, kind of infinite, uncountable.
Tani che pa da me ba che tunga ja ma to ta zama ra wa se na de mang ne chene re yo ma re sta ngaro se ni pa te to ta da ra yo ma re ma to.
So you might say an unfathomable lifespan, in other words, an inexhaustible lifespan. That sounds pretty far-fetched, like it's not possible. But actually, in our current state, yes, that is not possible. But it's not something that is completely out of the question.
Pe chi de pe si wo chi la. Ja na ga no chi ma kan ro ki ga. La ma za chi mo chi wa re es ke ra chi mo chi.
So Geshe is thinking of one particular example, which is said to have been a great adept who brought the Buddha Dharma to China.
Hakosarawa o ta te sunji ge temba ma kan ro ki tini lama ti ga nga jagang ro ne lenge mo lo dre ngi che lo ma hakosarawa lo ni ja sa ja re sa ke lama chi dun ja ne la te sa ne su shin de ne ro aso
And it was said that Nagarjuna ne lo nija sumja sungshu shu sum
ni ja sa jan ro sa ki lama te ge mo lo dre ko lo ma ko ran zo mo le ne lo ja sa ro sa re
sumja dro sa re
teni lama chi la te ne
lo sumja yimpe kapla tene gombolunju.
Mara mata so so ni yo se shi was lama te zombali le ne lo suja ju ja de sa wares
Okay.
ka ti dil
Loso.
tendi chi lama chi la te nga su shi mo ro as
Ale.
jana lama ti
Loso.
ta tanda ma se lo ja ma de ma ro was anzo
Sorry, I'm a little confused. I'm going to have to ask for help. Sorry. Kale.
me ngaro so ma se ta hale to so so ni pa ra na lo ja ni ja suja de yo res pena lama chi ne bolo de lo ma lama chi
Loso.
jaga lo ji ja re sar ten ko tanda de den dus
Loso. Datong yeres.
jami lama ti
Ale.
tesa ne nga su shi mo ro as
Di cheron.
jami lama ti gas
Ale,
mo chi kan
jami
ro ki lama ti
Ale, loso.
koro tinu tini yo res
Ale, gombolunju giketo chi gompa madzone tutu
o
rimpo.
lo sa ja de dus
Okay, sorry. So there was a particular Lama who introduced the Buddha Dharma in China. He is said to have been able to receive that Buddha Dharma directly from a disciple of Nagarjuna. This disciple of Nagarjuna was said to be 300 or 400 years old, so he had achieved kind of like an unfathomable life.
o ta lama ti ta che chi yo ar kar re tang ti ji ma la gi is
So Geshe can't remember the name of that particular Lama, but he'll try to look that up.
o ta tanda yin na jaga la pge go jan ju yo be lo ke cha yo res lama te
And it's actually said in some stories that this particular Lama actually remains in India in kind of a state of samadhi or meditation, that he has not yet passed away.
o ta te lama te sar chi she ten zio ne ta te pet si wo re ma te ma ma ro was
And so we can see, right, if that's true, that unfathomable life is something that is attainable through practice.
o ta jana la nu chi tombo ma kan ro ke lama te res ta chi bo chi res ta ha ma res
Yeah, so he is connected with that Lama who first brought the Dharma to
kale ne
China.
se ba ten so ke ka wa
Kale kapakini.
ye lo ji ja se se kale ka wa Again, so kale ka wa te che to yi shi pa da me ba ta yi shi pa da me ba sa na ta ko ga was shi ra ka ze ina sa ja cheran ro so na shi pa ja to mo mi go ne ta tu ma ni nge sa tu ya ta ni go ya was
So unfathomable wisdom, of course, is that transcendental wisdom in the sense that it's unfathomable. For example, that direct realization of wisdom that can manifest through thinking about hundreds of flawless reasonings.
o te re shi sha wa ndi so wa o shi sha wa se re te le mi de ta ge re sa de res
So at the end, actually, we don't have this in the English, but there's a particle that comes at the end of the title, she chawa. So, actually it is here. Lama Zopa Rinpoche translated it. So called. She chawa is called. It's giving me a hard time today.
그렇게 나가. 다 대화 첨보 다 대미야 리라고 말해. 대화 첨보는 내가 디그 거니 태면이야. 만다와 이다 첨보.
So Mahayana Sutra, right? We know Mahayana is the great vehicle, but there's another meaning which is here, that there are 7 characteristics of Mahayana Sutras that distinguish them from the sutras of the Shravakayana.
다 첨보 디세 그래. 첨보 디드.
So 7 greatnesses, they're often called.
다 동보텔 미파 첨보.
So the first is a kind of a great focus.
다 니티도 루자이나 테메니까이나 다 미파 센체 다 그렇게 니질마도 다 미토가 메아이자 미파 충어다 다 대화 첨보 다 요메바 센체 요졸 미가 요아이자 미파 첨보.
So the first is an object of a focus, but it's more like an object of reference. And so what this means is that the sutras of the lower vehicles, right, they are kind of propounded and practiced for the liberation of oneself in a limited way. The Mahayana Sutras, however, have as an object of reference all sentient beings, which is, of course, extremely vast. So this is the first greatness.
다 니파텔 드와 첨보.
So the second, Drupa, the second is great attainment.
다 드와 첨보도 맞아 니젤 그랬대. 다 알레 단다 찔라바이나. 아니 다 니티도 로자가 니까리나 루데 쪼 저거 요아이자 오다 된다 다 데스 주주라고 지레스.
So in terms of the attainment of the sutras of the lower vehicles, for example, the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, they are aiming at their own liberation, right? So the attainment is more limited. It wouldn't be great.
다 대화 첨보 그니까 알았더니 연제대 쪼르네 다 제대 하고 살아 다 되면 계자 뭐시야 살아와서 다 대쪼 지금 요아이자 대화 첨보.
So those in the lower vehicles striving for their own welfare, whereas the Mahayana Sutras and the practice of those is for the welfare of all sentient beings. So it is a greatness of attainment.
다 선바텔 이시 첨보.
Geshe. Shirab Geshe.
Yeah.
And so then the next one is a great exalted wisdom, or as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says here, transcendental wisdom. So the greatness of transcendental wisdom.
다 다메니 또 봐요 봐도 찌빠래 되네. 아까 살아와 이나요 리파 자토 몸에 건데 다 손으로 또 둬야 돼. 아니 니한테 그때 루자를 매바지. 아니 대바 첨보로 요아이자 돼.
So this is related to wisdom, and of course, in the Hinayana and the Mahayana, you have the realization of the same two selflessnesses of person and phenomena. However, in the Mahayana presentation of the teachings on selfless and emptiness, there are hundreds and hundreds of flawless reasonings that are expounded. In the case of the other, it is not. So this is greatness of exalted wisdom.
다 쇼지세만 눌러라요 온본도 또 보도 넘버 제바되고 왔다 드리라더니 용기와레스.
Yeah, and then of course, we also come to teachings on bodhisattva practitioners of limited faculties and of sharp faculties, and it's also related to a similar principle.
다 저와텔 젠디 첨보.
So then the next one is the greatness of joyous effort, Sundru Champo, the greatness of joyous effort.
니틸이는 다 채서了보여. 조사 더바존이라. 니티 다좀에 공부토토야.
Mitsesum. Right. And so then this is related to the length of time of practice for those of the lower vehicles, the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas and so forth. It is said that attainment is normal is possible in sort of normal 3 human lifetimes.
So
because it's a little bit easier, right? It's a shorter amount of time required for practice. Like we ourselves might think, oh, actually, like that sounds pretty appealing, right?
당연 양해 두 버튼이 지금 소모세는 가서 기가 다들은 이제 드릴 돈은 자 타바터는 되게 되어서 다들 레그마로 저주스게 도만네.
Yeah, so Geshe-la's friend was actually reflecting on this, and he was like, actually, the Shravakas have it pretty good, like only 3 kind of normal lifespans, and then he was like, oh, maybe I contravened my bodhisattva vows, so he felt kind of bad.
다들 이제 그런 니빠치 때서 다 니빠치 줄았더니 이거 요아에서 가오는 채설마도 추사.
Yeah.
So
this, of course, is related to like the capacity and the affinities. So in the case of these lower vehicles, right, they're aiming towards that sort of lower attainment. So that happens in kind of 3 normal lifespans.
다 되는 루자 텔리 때제 오 거라진디 체가 이자 까와 잘 조사네라 루자 다치미 고모데 되게 아레스
Kelpa ja. Gonsu mitse sum.
Yeah.
Tene kelpo
Kawaja.
ja. Okay. So sorry. So Geshe is actually dividing it into the 3 vehicles of Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Mahayana. So in the first, the Shravakas, as we said, 3 lifetimes for attainment. Kalpaja.
Yeah.
Kalpaja.
마르 sorry.
Mitse jarebe.
까와자레. Yeah.
For the Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realizers, it's said to be 100 kalpas, 100 eons to reach that attainment. So they accumulate merits and kind of embark on that journey, thinking that, for the sake of liberation, I will become a Pratyeka Buddha, a solitary realized being. So then, of course, there's different ways we talk about this attainment according to different practices, but ultimately in the Mahayana Sutras proposed by Buddha Shakyamuni, so to achieve the full enlightenment as is the goal in the Mahayana, this takes 3 incalculable eons of cultivation of the collections. So also we can understand when we talk about greatness of effort, if we are really somebody who is aspiring to that supreme liberation, to complete and perfect Buddhahood, then we have to be in it for the long haul and manifest great effort, right? It's not something that is easily achieved. So that's the greatness of effort. And Geshe said, hopefully by sharing these greatnesses and so forth, you see that sutras such as this are not unrelated to our practice, right? They are very much related. So the next one is great, number 5 is great, I would translate this as great skillfulness in method. Great skillfulness in method. Sipa dang? Yep. So this relates to those of the lower vehicles like the Shravakayana not being able to practice in a way that overcomes both of the fears of Sipa, existence, and solitary peace. They're able to practice in a way that is able to overcome the fears of existence, of samsara, but not in a way that is able to overcome the fears of solitary peace, right? Or individual nirvana. So bodhisattvas, on the other hand, they are practicing in a way that is able to overcome both of the fears of existence and solitary peace. So in this way, the bodhisattvas of the Mahayana have a greatness of skillfulness in method. So then the 6th one is, it's a little bit like great attainment. It seems to have the same Tibetan word, but it has a different connotation, so I'll translate it as great practice for our purposes here. So in terms of what they are practicing to and what they attain, we understand that those of the lower vehicles, the Pratyeka Buddhas and Shravakas, are only able to attain a state of liberation which achieves their own welfare alone.
오다 데리 다 손지 셈바수 타바 여쇼 아까사라 타바 라나메 바라와 오다 손지 그 컴포트 야 생지 유주 된다 손지 컴포트 그 요아이자 데바 쳔보.
So those practicing the Mahayana, on the other hand, they achieve great liberation, the state of full and complete Buddhahood. And this is a state which allows them to work unceasingly in the most effective way towards the welfare and benefit of sentient beings. So that is the greatness here.
오다 데리 다 타마 전에 야 쳔보 덤바 데라더니 철레 쳔보.
Chinle Chempo. And so the seventh, the final of these points is Chinle Chempo, so greatness of enlightened activity.
오다 데리 다 녀티도 로자이나요 다 간조도 다가서 야 손지 세도 드니 야 대화 쳔보선 카지보시에 되기 뭐뭐로 왔어. 녀티도 로자이나요 생제게 대 뭐뭐 되고 요아래. 이나치는 여보 뭐뭐 지고 요아래.
So first there is a caveat that is required here when we speak about this greatness of enlightened activities. When we talk about ourselves, right, as people who are professing the Mahayana, it's very kind of easy to just utter the words, I'm working for the benefit of all sentient beings, from our lips. But what are we actualizing? In fact, compared to the Shravakas, the hearers, and the Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realizers, we're probably doing less, because the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, they do engage in things to benefit others.
다 손주 생년에 녀래 제게 보게 손주 세 롱롱 로키지나 다 여 메바 디설 딜 여 메바 가디나 생지 몸보지 대저 도요 아이자 절레 쳔보 손지
But one who has arisen bodhicitta is able to work unceasingly day and night without prejudice for the sake of all beings without exception. And it is connected with that we propose this seventh point, which is the greatness of enlightened activity.
어다 대 누지지 먹에 니테도 루잘 텐데요 말아왔어. 어다 던지기 전에 절레 쳔보.
So of course those Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas don't possess that manifestation, so this is a greatness of enlightened activity of the Bodhisattva vehicle.
어다 쳔보 더그데 내츠치 보게 만다와지 요 아이자 테네 대바 쳔보 좀다 미테도 요아레스.
So because this is a teaching of the Mahayana, which possesses these seven greatnesses, in the title it is explicitly stated as a Mahayana Sutra.
그래서 어다 대바 쳔비도 태바세나 태바세나 고산 리블라요 고사요 절라요 고사요 생각하레스.
And when we speak of yana or vehicle, yana or vehicle can be understood from the point of view gyudangje bourgeois, from the point of view of cause and from the point of view of effect.
베나 예수 파시투 아니 데이니 보시 사죠. 대르질라요 태바세 아티고 요아레스 콘도사가 롱가 들어왔어.
So the yana is, we can consider, it's called a vehicle, but we can actually consider it more as like the road that vehicle travels on. So in the case of the Mahayana, it's the vehicle that encompasses the practices of the 6 paramitas or perfections, the 4 ways of gathering, the 10 bhumis, and so forth.
손질은 로사가 롱가 되었다 태바세 요아레스 된다.
So it says vehicle, but it's actually the road that vehicle travels on, and this particular road is the road to complete enlightenment. So it's the Mahayana.
어때야 당가 빠랑 같은 간주 라딘 노지라기 술로 졸로 돌로 골로 강가라면 태바세 하고 요아레스.
Yeah. So, for example, in the Heart Sutra, we have Teyata, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhiswaha. So this indicates progressing kind of on that road from the different paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, and so forth.
단 리브 소지겠더니 야 타이다 야 소지고 공부텔라요 태바세는 라주고 요아레스 타두 태바.
And from the point of view of the cause, right, it is the vehicle that travels on the road that leads to that destination of full Buddhahood. So the road is explained by its destination rather than kind of its actual continuity.
다 손지고 던스 다가제 생지미다 야 가주마주 수바 말에 손지고 수바 일단 너.
And so because it was spoken by the Buddha, we have the last word here, Sutra, right? It wasn't spoken by just anybody or by a different teacher. It was spoken by the Buddha.
다 제시에 바데 리라고 말이 두는 또 밀야 로주는 뭐 소신도 왔어.
Yeah, so you can see that even just in the title already, there's a lot of things that we can study and practice.
데레 다 기바테레 다 기바 자게 베케데 자데네 베케데 자 니칼라게 기바카레스.
And so now we have the necessity of rendering the title in this way. So why do we need it to render it in both the Sanskrit and the Tibetan?
제세 찌를 자게 미야테 기바 쪼치 가리와르스 켈 파차자야 제세 찌야레스.
So one reason for the Sanskrit is to be able to place an exceptional imprint within the mind stream.
jese nipa chela ane locha wano ji kari chega ya to jese chembo ji yare.
The second is that by putting in the Sanskrit, it's a method to recollect the kindness of those who translated it into Tibetan.
되니까 kedra te da thoboso kundiwa.
He's like, then Ngodrup becomes a big person and not translating sutras, so don't worry. I'm just Ngodrup. It's all good.
아서 살다 로자 가지 가서 말아. 다 jese samba chela be ji jano ji kari te ji yare.
Yeah. And so Geshe said we can actually consider that injikedi, right?
Huh?
Injikedi. Pekadrin jaboro.
Me be ji jabor jingama.
Ale, loso. And another thing that this helps to remind us of is the kindness of the great Dharma kings of Tibet.
다때 자가도 be ne ji ta te loza wa selen ina ji kwayo wa was.
Yeah, so of course we're talking about those great beings of Tibet and India, but also we can understand anyone who's engaging in the practice of translation.
kedra te ra te wi de ma no.
He's like, that was a praise of Ngodrup. It's not good for my ego, but fortunately they don't happen too often.
다 che jo che she paten locha wa 다 gi paten loso wa.
Yeah, so that's we explained the meaning of the title. We gave the title in both languages, and we also explained the purpose or the necessity for rendering it this way.
So
I prostrate to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is the verse of prostration.
So
this tells us which of the three baskets this particular teaching kind of belongs to. I prostrate to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas indicates that it belongs in the Sutra basket.
So in
this way we have commenced our commentary on the Long Life Sutra, and then we will leave that here.
So of course, in
the future sessions, because it's the main topic and there's actually a lot to cover, we will begin with words of my perfect teacher. So Geshe's idea is that we'll have 8 sessions, so 2 months of these teachings. We'll get as far as we can in the text, then we'll go through the others in the series, and then maybe circle back and continue.
So the
author of this text, his name is Dza Patrul Rinpoche, and Dza Patrul incidentally is from the same region of Tibet that Geshe is from. So he was said to be a bodhisattva amongst the bodhisattvas, and that he was a very exceptional lama who had been able to abandon concerns of fame and so forth, right? A very holy being. And so Geshe said, we speak about him as a bodhisattva. Perhaps at the time the teachings of this text were given and composed, but by now he has certainly reached enlightenment. So we can look at this text of words of my perfect teacher in 2 ways. First, of course, as a commentary on the entire sutras, the collected discourses of the Buddha, and secondly, as a commentary on a revealed teaching from the great Mahasiddha Jigme Lingpa, which is known as the Longchen Nyingtik. So there's Longchen Nyingtik. There's different kind of, names for this teaching. And so mainly it is a teaching on how to achieve realization of Dzopa Chenpo. Öza sena? Öza sena
gyulu da
무지개 사와서 줘라.
listen. So of the clear light, Dzogpa Chempo, Dzogchen, and so this text is explaining the preliminary practices one must cultivate to lead up to that.
와다시고 돈바스에는 무치한다. 워치바레한디 와서 오다 든디게서 주바 침비터네 로 타두고 보게 길을 씌워라 년도 든디게 사다데 간줄이 같이 뭐래.
So the presentation of the various holy beings will be very similar in order to be able to achieve this ultimate illuminated or a clear light practice of Dzogchen. One must first accumulate many necessary causes, and these are known as the preliminary practices. So that's what's being explained here.
주바 침보 루치니디게 년디티 그졸라메 샬루이 시샤와 유소.
Okay, listen, sorry. So
괜찮아.
we are beginning with the text. So we shall read the title. Herein are contained the teachings of the preliminaries of the great perfection, known as the words of my perfect teacher. And so then we begin with a prologue. Venerable teachers whose compassion is infinite and unconditional, I prostrate myself before you all. So then I'm beginning with this verse of prostration, the prostration to the objects of the holy lamas, the venerable teachers, and then explaining the reason why we prostrate to them. Here they are being prostrated due to their attainment of compassion that is infinite and unconditional, right? So there are different types of compassion, sumyorerwa. This 3 different types of compassion, and this is the supreme.
senche zola maybe niji sa niji da da de shen yoga niji chi es niji chembola.
So the first type of great compassion is the great compassion that has as its object of reference sentient beings.
ta pa do ma ta pa do de me do tu ni gong so no ma to ne senche shi gang ya so no to ne da de du ma ta ga de so no to na senche zola maybe niji se ga res.
So this type of compassion, great compassion that is brought forth referencing merely sentient beings. This is just thinking of sentient beings and the sufferings that they experience as a way of bringing forth that great compassion, and not thinking about specifics like impermanence, selflessness, and so forth in the background. So just thinking of the suffering of those sentient beings. Yeah, so actually we need facets of all 3 of these types of compassion, even though we may not have realized great compassion. These 3 things are things we need to practice. So this first one referencing sentient beings, it's still very important, but it's not the most powerful because it's not referencing many different reasonings and so forth. It's just thinking of the terrible sufferings that sentient beings endure and then wishing them to be free of those sufferings and causes great compassion. So then, actually, although it is easy to think about this, in the first point,
하고 셀 뽑아도 니 빠든지 지와래.
yeah, 하고서.
세제 요주 근데 강에 매봐 저기 손에 좋아지와라 와서. 딘니 빨라 때네. 소소가 처음에 강에 뭐 지금 단다요다. 네가 셀 내봐 용도야 말에.
So one who is able to really bring forth this compassion that is referencing sentient beings, that compassion is said to be powerful in the sense that if we truly have that within our mind, then all of the problems and obstacles that we encounter in our daily lives, these will not be so able to disturb us.
다 니지 챔비가 뇨레티가 셀 강에 저거 말에 셀 키보트에 세지 제세지 디요아레스.
And so one of the reasons we say, people may think it's difficult because to bring this compassion forth, we have to think of suffering. But actually, compassion was not taught for the sake of suffering. It was taught for bestowing mental happiness. And this is one of the reasons.
다레 돈비깔레 텐데깔레테 용시기로와 senche 강에 뭐 소노토네 다 대지 프게 메바서 그근데 선지 용하샤발 강에 뭐 셀 샤가이자 데스깔레 용시기요아레스.
So in the beginning, of course, to really develop that wish to free sentient beings from their suffering, we have to contemplate the various sufferings that they are experiencing. So in the beginning stages, this can be something that is difficult for the mind.
페나 유게 레제파 비타보지나 당에 뭔가로 림바티 뭐뭐 강에 메바서 이 선지 요케지나 강에 주실할 때는 콜셀 강에 요토요 말레스.
So we can think about the example of somebody who is maybe the leader of a particular country. And we know that people in such positions, they face a lot of flack and obstacles, but he or she has the thought, I'm in this position to be able to bring benefit, and so whatever happens is worth it. And so then for this reason, they are able to kind of remain undisturbed. It's a little bit like that. Pardon me.
No me. 괜찮아.
Sorry about that. It's somebody from Kitchener who keeps calling and calling.
파스에 아트라메 파스 타와. 괜찮아. 계시죠? 그거 치쇼. 드라메.
Sorry about that. I was trying to ignore it, but they kept calling and calling.
레비 괜찮아.
Sorry, my deep apologies. Really, really. I think that's the first time that's happened. I hope so. That's okay.
아따 동이 되는 분들 좋아. 텐디치레스 아고서로 대이자 당한조 니질을 보게 소왕이네 질레소나. 어따 텐도 뽑아도 니빠지 되고 여러마티 강에 텐데서 그요 말레스.
So actually, if we think of compassion as something that is vast, that is going to help us bring forth a brave and courageous attitude, right? We don't need to think of it as something that is difficult or hard to practice.
다 델리프게 오지 셀소노 도키지나. 코알은 요다서 그 강에 노데 강가 로 단지 마리바티 다 템보 지냐네 다 디겠더니 레엔다마라사. 다 델라테네 다 코알 코덴두스.
But there's another type of reflecting on compassion which thinks that, sentient beings are troubled by the ignorance grasping at the self. Because they are troubled by this ignorance grasping at the self, this compels them into all sorts of negative or unwholesome actions. And this is what keeps samsara, what keeps cyclic existence turning.
아까서 다 데미지세시 워시워로 왔어. 다 알게 좀 먹으면 돼. 다 내서 던지지자. 다 내서 이내 못다 봐도 지시소나. 오늘 다 코알 강에 뭐 중요한 도근데 손에 다 등을 다 그런데 손을 또 게텔라. 칠라 미비니지스.
미탁바로와.
소노
당신 말이바 말이.
말아.
알레.
못다 봐.
알레. 간서 당신
단지 말이봐.
Tagzin marikpa.
Tanzu.
Yeah, so sorry. So the second one is thinking that, I'm sorry, my apologies. It is thinking that sentient beings are not able to comprehend impermanence. Because they are not able to comprehend impermanence, this compels them into all different types of negative actions, which continues the perpetuation of samsara. So may they be free from that. So this is the type of, the second type of compassion, which is referencing impermanence.
그래서 어다 대니지 첨보 지바레 니지 첨보 임바 지바레 되는 이나요 간디디테레스.
It is also a type of great compassion, but out of these three types of great compassion in terms of its power, it's somewhere in the middle.
다체 토슈 tel라서 다 릴라보야 말아. 와스 카니시아도 간데 때서 릴라라보레 되네. 코 셰파보 용조 때 난즈 마리 파티게지 잔두.
So then the third type is an even deeper comprehension, kind of building on this, which is thinking what keeps us circling, what keeps us spinning within samsara is this ignorance grasping at the self.
시 거의 내 이날에 농계 소속다 로로 소속다 링아에서 그 샤와강에 뭐 지다 시워러바스 대지 용주 셰파 보때 난즈 마리 파티레.
So one thinks that, we understand that the doer, in other words, the one that keeps samsara perpetuating, is ourselves, specifically our activities of body, speech, and mind that continue the perpetuation of karma and samsara, and that these are underpinned by this fundamental misunderstanding, which is the ignorance grasping at the self.
다 대메바 조케테 아니 데메도 비시라 로지 메바도 비시라테 동보 소소가 지라 시와시 갈래 센지 요줄을 다대 신의 강에테 메바 차나 손바테 아니 메메라 메비지.
So this is called non-referential compassion, non-referential great compassion. It's considered the greatest of these three types of great compassion, understanding that, through understanding that things lack true existence, this is defeating the ignorance grasping at the self. And as I have that realization, how wonderful if all sentient beings could have that realization, defeating ignorance grasping at the self, the source of their suffering. So that's non-referential compassion.
다 던지거든요. 냐 니지 모두 덴비거다. 던이 샤이테 돌 샤차기스.
So then because these lamas possess this infinite compassion, I prostrate myself before them.
단디님이자 지바 아니 지비다 고로 이님이자 지저가. Lama.
And so this is a prostration to the lamas, and then we have a prostration to specific groups of the lineage lamas.
Jai gumba rinzi daiji kuza mele kawa raji pi tombi jisa teni tashenba jisa lama nola shansalo.
Conquerors of the mind lineage, Vidyadharas of the symbol lineage, most fortunate of ordinary beings who, guided by the enlightened ones, have attained the twofold goal, teachers of the three lineages, I prostrate myself before you.
Jai guji sena jibachi tombote.
Jai gongsena?
Java nochi gumbi jiba.
Loso. Yeah. So they have achieved a great understanding.
And so
then so they are members of the conquerors of the mind lineage, and then the next one they are Vidyadharas of the symbol lineage. And then the most fortunate ones of ordinary beings. So prostrating to, it looks like prostrating to the lamas of those two particular lineages. So these are two, just to be clear, these are kind of two lineages of Dzogchen great perfection instruction.
Chise lonto chiki gumbani resa is lungi shinonzi deji nongo tukindo denze kache chiche jabo lasha cha.
In the expanse where all phenomena come to exhaustion, you encountered the wisdom of Dharmakaya. In the clear light of empty space, you saw Sambhogakaya, Buddha fields appear. To work for beings' benefit, you appeared to them in Nirmanakaya form. Omniscient sovereign of Dharma, I prostrate myself before you. So prostrating to the Lama by the way of the realization of these three kayas, we can understand this as a general prostration to the lineage lamas, but especially to the root lama of these teachings, which would be Longchenpa.
This one, Chambi Shija, Kunja Tenizi, Tutsegi, the Jupata Sha, Salo Tete, Temba Sanzeba.
And so in your wisdom, in your wisdom you saw the true nature of whatever can be known. The light of your love beamed benefit upon all beings. You elucidated the teachings of the profound path, summit of all vehicles. Rigzen, so knowledge holder, Jigme Lingpa, I prostrate myself before you. So this is the source of this particular teaching, who is, I believe, the Lama of the Lama of the author. So he was a great Lama who was able to kind of, without differentiation, seeing all beings as kind of beautiful individual flowers, able to teach the profound path without exception. So it's a sun shining light over all, because the the compassion, which is the motivation for their teaching, is for all beings without exception.
어딘지서 다데 그진 너는 지메 오 걸어라. 시레진 신예 처주니 수겐노인 데체 탈론게 공라 공도 잡아 타이바 드지 자일라마 라샤 차다고 그진 지메 오 걸어라 샤사.
So you were Lord Avalokiteshvara.
말 지메 그진 지메 자인이고.
Jimmy Jai Ngugu. Yeah, Ngugu, Mama Ngugu. So then you were Lord Avalokiteshvara himself in the form of a spiritual friend. Whoever heard you speak was established on the path to freedom. To fulfill all beings' needs, your activity was infinite. Gracious root teacher, I prostrate myself before you. So this is Gyawe Ngugu, is how he is known. This is the Lama from who the author directly received the instruction. So this Lama was said to be like Chenrezi in that he would be able to manifest exactly according to the needs and affinities of particular beings. So with these Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezi-like qualities, on that basis, we prostrate to him. Yeah.
Temba yonzu kachin ji biju menga nyembo chechi songji chi lonjang nyendo tmo shatono dombi chala nyelo pawa chi sala kode teza medo chi chume lami kalyo manwa ronlo cheji ngejan deshe chi lado lami daji shenji la.
The writings of omniscient Longchenpa and his lineage contain the Buddha's entire teachings, the quintessence pith instructions that bring Buddhahood in a single lifetime, the ordinary, outer, and the inner preliminaries of the path, and the additional advice on the swift path of transference. May the Buddhas and the teachers bless me that I may explain definitively as I have remembered them, wonderfully profound yet clear and easy to understand, the unerring words of my perfect teacher.
So
this could be understood as the oath to compose, and here Patrul Rinpoche is saying the teachings of the luminous great perfection, its root, as well as all of its branches. I will explain them and their preliminaries as clearly as I am able. So also there's a request built in here, right, which is based upon this oath or this promise to compose. Lamas and yidams, tutelary deities, please bestow your blessings. The faithful record of my peerless teacher's instructions on the general outer and inner preliminaries for the heart essence of the vast expanse from the great perfection is divided into three parts: the ordinary outer preliminaries, the extraordinary inner preliminaries, and, as part of the main practice, the swift path of transference. So what you'll notice here is it speaks of common preliminaries and uncommon preliminaries. So one way of understanding the common preliminaries is the preliminaries common to the vehicles of the Shravakas, the hearers, the Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realizers, and the Bodhisattva vehicle of the Mahayana practice. And another way of understanding common preliminaries, they're also spoken of as outer preliminaries or general preliminaries.
And
the inner or uncommon preliminaries, one way of understanding these is as the practices of the Mahayana or the Bodhisattvas. So we'll slowly come to more explanation of this. And then other practices that are here as part of the main practice, the swift practice of transference is the English given here, so that's the practice of Poa. These and other kind of, we could say, esoteric practices. Geshe said he's not expert in all of these, but hopefully we'll go through a general idea. So the outer, yeah, sorry. So the outer or ordinary preliminaries, Geshe said, not difficult to understand, and also we've covered aspects of these before. These are 6 in number: the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages of a human rebirth, impermanence of life, the defects of samsara, actions, the principle of cause and effect, the benefits of liberation, and how to follow a spiritual friend. So if we need to be able to build a tall building, right, the first step is to have a solid foundation. This is very important. Yeah, so Geshe said getting the foundation in place also isn't a guarantee. We need to continue to work to build all of the various stories of the building, and that is something that depends upon our own effort and determination. So Geshe said he does have a short story that he may tell today, but seeing your questions is actually the more important thing. We'll begin with taking question first, and then maybe if there's not so many, we can do the story. So with a happy mind, then dedicate the roots of virtue we've accumulated. And of course, folks, if you need to get on with your day, if you don't have time to stay for the Q&A, that's fine. But you're also most welcome to ask questions. So we'll do the dedication. Jancho semjo rinpoche maje banam chejo reche chepa nyamba meba yang gone gondo bewa resho tongni tawa rinpoche maje banam chejo reche chepa nyamba meba yang gone gondo bewa resho jambe pao jita jemba don gondo zambo deyan deshende deda gungi jesu dalo chir gewa dida tangche radongo desu shebe gewa tangche ge ngawa gangla chodo ngaba de dagi gewe tsawa digo gyon zambo chuchi rabdu ngawa ge. Through the merits accumulated by both myself and others, through the power of this, may all of the wars and other sufferings currently plaguing the world, may these be completely cleared away. May all of those possessed of evil thoughts, through these merits, may these evil thoughts be completely cleared away. May they be able to bring forth attitudes of kindness, and hence, following that, love and compassion. And so then we understand that what is blocking our achievement of realizations of the positive mental qualities is the negative potentialities, the negative karma that we have accumulated since beginningless time. Through these merits, may this negative karma be completely cleared away and purified, and in this way may we have a ground for establishing realization of the positive mental qualities in our mind. And in this way, also think of all of these roots of virtue that I've been accumulating today, with joy, rejoice in being able to do that.
Oh yeah.
So we'll pause there.
단다 바드세를 소소 드리지보다 나오지라서 단다 그래.
So Geshe said roots of virtue, all roots of virtue, not just today's. I may have said today by accident, I'm sorry. And also let me apologize for the phone. That's actually one of my pet peeves when you're like in some kind of a lecture and someone's phone rings. So I know how annoying that is. So my apologies. And on that note, do we have any questions? Don't be shy. I think my sound is on.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Let me turn up my volume a little bit. I think I did turn the volume high enough, just so we can hear you a little better. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, please go ahead.
Ngodrup, I had a question when Geshe, you were talking about the beginning of Words of My Perfect Teacher, and Geshe said that compassion was not taught for suffering. It was taught for bringing mental happiness.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if he could explain that a little bit more, because it made me think of the four immeasurables, and I feel like I've been thinking about compassionate in a negative way.
Okay, sure. Nganzo kunzang lama jinung tambo chik lab songarwa sangye nangshe di dungel yongya gichedu chima sons rwa ninje seria di dungel gichedu sungma sons dewa gichedu ninje treshe jab sons ane koche na chichena ko ninje samro tangtang tes norson karinsena dunge dabo chik yongire duas chichena ko norsons di labya gi gimsen karege dunge gi chedu ninje suma sons dewa gi chedu ninje she
mara niji goyina sel kangya tegen du sekretale tombikale trikashi yongyares.
So the reason that Geshe stated this is that for some folks, when they're first trying to meditate on compassion, there might be a feeling of difficulty or suffering that they experience.
다 대지티 다 미셔도 지세 대지 요아레스 두모시나르와 제레세는 이지 덤버 드비가라 예수서 강엘라 소바도 다 강에 주주소노토네 알레 녜럴더니 지 용그요아르와스.
And so the reason for this, actually, we can't say that it's without reason that people experience this, right? At the beginning point of trying to bring forth compassion, we have to think of the suffering of sentient beings, including the suffering of those beings in the three unfortunate realms and so forth. And as one contemplates that, right, there is a difficult feeling, because those are difficult things to think about, but they're needed as preliminaries for arising compassion.
다 니지가 거기 옛조대 강에테 말와스. 니지가 옛조대 둥아도 자나타네 요아가 되레스. 레비차데레스.
But what we need to understand is the object of focus that allows us to arise compassion is not suffering itself. The object of focus that allows us to arise compassion is the thought, may they be free from suffering and its causes. This is very important.
니지 첨보 니네티가 소화하게 슈터벌 레니 코타니 뭐 자기요나 야로들 예니 민저 하소지 요아레스 요아레스.
And to
하소 첨보도 말이 디질을 와셔도.
Laksam. Yeah. So then and also to really bring forth this great compassion authentically, it needs to have in its background what we call a superior intention.
어떤 든지 이자 나로서 단다 칸이 녀보시에들 니지 첨보 마세데라마도 야에글 요키 뭐 가시 강에 응함에 봐서 이자 니바지 매아이자 네스 몸보 강에 되기 말이스.
Yeah. And so part of our difficulty in cultivating compassion is because, like, we can utter the words like, may all sentient beings be free from suffering, but we're not even able to cultivate an unbiased wish for freedom from suffering for the circle of beings that we encounter in our daily lives in many cases. And so if we can't even kind of fathom having that wish for beings that we encounter in our daily lives, how much more difficult is it going to be to develop that wish for those beings inhabiting the unfortunate states of existence who we don't meet in our daily lives.
다 거의 눈에 때자 체쇼 로와리 때자 체쇼 갈요. 다른 이 생지 요조 강에 매봐서 갈 랭기대요. 게대요. 레가대요. 어다 던지지 장이 강에 매봐서 이 손비선서 요기대 니지 첨번 요랭이네 조기대 다 보게 템벌레선 대초아디요 하레스.
So the person who is practicing great compassion, how they can know they're on the right track is it's connected with this intention, thinking today I have the basis, right, of this human form, which is said to be the ideal basis for the practice of the teachings. And then since I have this form, I have to do my very best. It is my responsibility for all those beings who are suffering to free them from suffering and the causes of suffering. And so that is kind of moving in the right direction towards that compassion.
어다 델 소소가 단단 간주 강에서 대학 내서 간디 질레바 이나요. 쟁에 졸을 샤야지 마도 기강에 콜 셀니아 도요.
And a person who really holds this wish and this intention to benefit beings in this way, he or she is naturally able to practice this instruction that we call transforming obstacles into the path, transforming adverse conditions into the path at all times. Because of this powerful motivation, those things do not cause them so much difficulty.
다 못다 봐도 돈이도 대지 손으로는 다 니지 쳐요. 봐도 다 슈치르 다 레비체 도벌 다 릴라워야 제 도보 돈으로 하레스.
And then as hinted at in the presentation, if one combines this attitude with a contemplation of aspects of impermanence and emptiness, then that compassion that one has arisen becomes more and more refined and more powerful.
내서 던지지요. 지말라리 돈이 돈아 니지시에 스티 도도더니
So that's why the great yogi Milarepa, he said that it was having realized emptiness that I was truly able to arise compassion.
So
there's a reason, right, that Milarepa said that and how his realization unfolded. But don't understand from that it's necessary to realize emptiness to realize great compassion, because this is not the case actually.
So
So did that answer your question, Annie?
But no, yes, that was very, very helpful, because it was kind of revelatory when he said that, because I realized that when I practice compassion, I tend to get a little glum about it, feeling like I'm supposed to in some way. But the idea of thinking you're bringing mental happiness sort of changes my own motivation for wanting to practice compassion.
Yes, yeah, no. So that's how he would approach it.
Thank you very much. That was great. Thanks.
You're welcome, Annie. Any other questions? I think I see a hand, but I can't see who it belongs to.
Hi, it's me. Thank you for this teaching today. I am struggling a little bit with what we just talked about. Chapter 4 of Words of My Perfect Teacher is a pretty difficult chapter, and there is a lot about suffering, and so I appreciate this different perspective on that. I find that I also have a hard time with wanting to be perfect in my practice, wanting to be perfect in my compassion. Of course, the word perfect, the translation, the English word perfect, it appears everywhere all of the time in the prayers and in the teachings. And so I feel often like I'm failing because my practice is far from perfect. And I just wondered if there might be some words that would help me manage that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'll put this question to Geshe, but I'd also like to share something with you, if I might, that kun sang can also be translated as all good, the words of my all good teacher. So maybe that's a less loaded translation than perfect. Maybe just something to think about. Ko nganzo di ginangro la ya netzel kalikabochi du perna liu jipadi la chen nang so nyawa gi du nga down then so shibjar chen drogi re duas ane di some tits kale kapore semla kange dabochik nyongi res ane di tokla ya ngan so yang di kun sang la me jelung sen kun sang sen punsum sopa then di dabo samlo tanda ngan so nyamlen punsum sopa kairi ne dabochi gogire duas ane di samlo tanda dine nganso nyamlen seri di kibo chene dro chugyo maris karin sena nganso punsun sopa che chugyo maris dine nganso kaji ne nyamlen gitse legio maris samso chikdua
mara ta ro so so kaje tate ta nyama nyamal ko ma che ba dana chi so yung ko was ko to so tin de chan kala chan ro was.
So Geshe says that he really has confidence that yes, we don't start out as perfect and we don't have perfection from the beginning, but if we maintain a continuity of our practice from day to day to day, we can have the confidence that we will eventually become kun sang, all good or perfect.
Mirte kale ki mandu ngine zone shomba go niji go sintigin ki wo twa ki wo te ga yara ma to kangen te mandu ngine chena.
And also think about like the practices that give you joy, right? Not just like of practice as something hard, but think about the aspects of the practice that give you joy, like meditating on love and compassion, especially with the technique that was mentioned. When we're meditating on love, for example, that brings forth a very joyful mind.
Nyole te deshi te ndu ma dandani kangen te mandu was kangen te ki chome be ser jire ndi wa.
So also to understand that, right, it's not the practice itself that is giving rise to our feeling of failure or stress or unhappiness or whatever it is, right? That is our projections in our mind that arise maybe in relation to how we think about the practice. But the practice itself, and when we cultivate it, have that confidence that that is actually creating causes for happiness.
Marbe.
Yeah.
O ma to dandani kale chu chi yo na ta te chi res de re mandu was ma nya na so no to ya de ta cho ya o ta karo so no to na ki wo chen do ya ne chi was.
And also don't, you don't only have to emphasize those aspects of the practice that are hard. There's many beautiful practices to do that can become very transformative. For example, thinking about virtue, about exalted things before we go to sleep and so forth, and then the sleep becoming an accumulation and so forth, right? So there's also many easy aspects to the practice as well.
O ta ma nya cha wa yina ni kula ma kula tra te te ka ta ji se yo chu chen de de na ta ge wa cha ba ma de ke so kan ri re tani.
So for example, if before you go to sleep, you just reflect on the things that you did right, and you rejoice in those, that practice of rejoicing will actually allow your whole sleep cycle to become an accumulation of virtue.
This one, o ta te ji za min yo le ti dandani de shi te ki to ko cha la ji re ma to kangen te yo na ta o nga ta yo pa yo ko ma de se ji wa was.
Yeah, so Geshe said, try to focus on those practices that are giving you joy, that are giving you meaning, right? Because we don't practice for the sake of suffering, and you don't want to have that kind of conception. Oh, the practice is hard; it's making me suffer.
Tani ya ba mo ji ka de ya.
Yeah. Then it's difficult to continue, right?
Ta tu ba she sana do le la yo ma res ngene ta kala te zo karma.
But of course, talking about perfection or whatever, actually generating these realizations in our mind, that's not something that's going to be easy. Geshe doesn't want to mislead you. That does take a lot of work.
Pena shari pa do manga pa sa sunji ge su ka ne le chit ya po su ne la. Di ka ne tu ba ma she ne melo ja ti ge chit su ge ni pa ti ma go pa na nga. Ne ji yo a sho ser ta ngo melo ya po zo ya tin ji bu su ji che de ka le chi chi su ma ta ga ro ge tu ba tho su.
So if we think about Shariputra and Vajrayāna, right, two of the main disciples of the Buddha, they were actually practitioners during the time of the previous Buddha, Kashyapa. And so at that time, they kind of made prayers that, through my practices of ethics, may I be able to realize ethics, to bring forth liberation in a future lifetime. And it is said that, because of those aspirations, that remained in their mind stream. A really long time went by, from the time of Kashyapa until the time of Shakyamuni Buddha's teaching. But then just from hearing one verse of dharma from Shakyamuni Buddha, they were able to achieve realization. So all the good stuff that we do, it stays there, right?
This one, o ta ti ha le ta di ni chi chin shoot de ba je tema chi su ne to ne tu ma ni ne to so ta nga zo yi ma chi na wo chi was.
It's like actually unfathomable. You're like, they heard like a short verse about the Four Noble Truths once, and he was able to achieve realization. It's like almost unbelievable, but that's the power of those virtues and efforts.
쉽게 노바그래. 등에나 치는 영기도만 ing에서 또 자서. 쉽게 노바그래. 등에나 치나.
Yeah.
근데 영기 배도만 ing에서 또
So in the morning he might have been an ordinary being, and then by the afternoon he was someone who realized emptiness.
어다 베게 야기와 야보냐 서정어는 야보서 드니서는 공가서 강가를 니바친도 왔어.
Yeah, so accumulate those virtues through your practice and dedicate them nicely, and then the power, right, the imprint of those virtues, that's going to remain with you.
샤리플 치 드가로기 테마 동보가 또 바시스 말했어. 뭔가 야나 코테니 호테테에서 니프쪽한다고 진짜 테마 니방거는 니 윤준지 되게 좋아했어.
So as the story, more details about the story. Hearing this verse once, Shariputra was able to realize emptiness, but Vajrayāna, he wasn't as sharp faculties as Shariputra, so he heard the verse twice, and then he was able to realize emptiness.
지치는 덴바제 때에서 지르도 이루어진다고 생각하지나.
So Geshe says that he thinks this is related to the short verse teaching on the four Arya truths, the Four Noble Truths.
어다 때 들어가서 싸움도 왔어. 테마 몸이네 다 림본에 받자요. 니바 치르거니.
So that type of kind of seemingly instantaneous realization, that doesn't happen without causes, right? And so the causes were all of those virtues that they continued to practice from long ago.
개인이 바이나요. 소소야 보냐나 요 앞에도 요 아래스. 다리 게이다 디바이나요. 체르체르도 요 아래스.
Yeah. And also understand fundamentally one of the characteristics of karma is that it increases. So we often talk about that in terms of the unwholesome karma that increases, but also the virtues that you accumulate through your practice, those increase and increase. So that's something to reflect on as well.
간조도 제sem바도 두셔르지 가서 계신도 사세로 와서 어다 대지 배치 또 해야 되고 또 어떤지 그래서.
And in terms of the negative karma, if you're worried about that increasing, you can just reflect on the teachings that we had previously on, like the Sutra of the 35 Buddhas, the confession of ethical downfalls, or a practice of Vajrasattva, and so forth.
어다 제모제 기재와 누지 손을 또 그요 아래스 모제 기지고 거기 도자야 버지와 이제 가보 조조서 아마도 거깔레시라 가요 말이스.
So one of the things that's advised is that one who is practicing the dharma should be like a child playing a game, right? So thinking about the great kind of outcome of dharma practice, that should give us a playful, joyful attitude. That will really help.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
저와 도쇼 저야 말해.
Anybody else?
뭐또 뭐 있는데 저야서 말다.
Sam, you can go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a question. So for the perfect realization of the Buddha's precious body, speech, and mind, we learned that certain conditions had to be created and fulfilled. And so the Pratyeka Buddhas or solitary realizers, could we understand that the conditions that they create are more geared towards understanding or fulfilling emptiness and not compassion, so that the body, speech, and mind that they're able to fulfill is not as precious or highly realized as someone who fulfills both compassion and emptiness?
Sure. Okay, yep. I understood your question, Sam. Yeah. Nganso di tambo di nganso di rubja di roa ku sum tuk sangi gi ku sum tuk sum roa ane sangi gi ku sum tuk sum drubiala nganso gyudang kien data gogiores matukjen drubtugyo mares dene di rangi sange rangel samlo tangna roa dene konso rangel karichene chungwares karin sena konso kusum tuksum tets topo drubyagi gyu kashe sasons ine konso sangegi ku sangegi sung dang sangegi tuk gyu samasons ane gyu denso kare chene samasons kare insena konso so tompani gi topa dabochi drupares sherab di drupares ine konso kandesla gure ningje ma simbe gi sherab chikyo tsang ningje di metsang konso sange gi kusung tuksum druptu masons direbesa.
야, 다 니지 로 세지메레스. 니지 요도 요아르와스. 니지 선바도 요아르. 또 니지 요아레스. 니지 제 도보 요기 요아레스.
로스
이나 니지 첨보세나.
랑게디.
루자도 니티세나.
So the first thing that we need to be clear about is we don't want to say that the Pratyeka Buddhas, so the solitary realizers, or the Shravakas, the hearers, are like bereft of compassion. They do have compassion, so their practice of emptiness is infused with compassion, but it is not infused with great compassion.
나로 롱기 생제 요조가 강에 때문에 와서기 이사한테 니지테 담에봐. 다 제발만 니지 첨보 요아르서 어디 자기 요아레스.
And so what is it that they are lacking that's like blocking them from the realization of a Buddha's holy body, speech, and mind? It is that compassion which is underpinned by the pure superior intention thinking, I myself alone will free sentient beings from suffering and causes of suffering and lead them to ultimate happiness. That's the part that's missing. And actually, this is an interesting question Geshe was mentioning, because in the debate manuals, you actually see a back and forth about whether these beings have compassion or not. So he says they do, but not great compassion.
야, 뼈나 가로 소이지 봐라. 와지 지는 안 졸라 용시기 요아레스. 아까다와. 다 소소 찌보게 된 쪼라고 데레마도 로바 베드 조금 미치는 세기 요아마레스.
And how can we think about that using a really easy example, right? If we think about someone who is, you know, like, we're going to take care of ourselves. So like Ngodrup is going to take care of Ngodrup, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't actually care about anybody else. I may do things to help them from time to time, but it's just that's not my main concern. This is the difference.
소시 된다로 다 다니 강에서 키티 녀모데레 녀모데메 와서는 간 저근도 소노토네 다 로케텔라. 타바조 도자수기 요아레스.
And so they may be helping others along the way, as most of us do, right? But that's not the main focus. Their main focus is wanting to defeat the afflictions so that they can achieve that state of individual liberation. And that explains the difference in attainment here.
다 손지 셈바도 다 요한 로켓이 때 말아와서 대조기에는 강가 요조 니에 받지 바래 대지 강가 하는 거거든 다 델리 대 요조 그치야 당할 내가 제거근데 위해서
But the bodhisattva practitioner, he or she is different from the Shravaka or the Pratyeka Buddha, because they think like, okay, yes, like I want to achieve my own liberation and extinguish the afflictions, but I can't just do that and try to achieve that on my own. Right from the beginning, they think all sentient beings are close to me, so I can't leave them behind. My main purpose has to be something that's going to achieve their benefit.
다 디가 돈이 또 비세들 로바 뭐 제전에 다 잡아만 놓지 거로바서는 내용 거로 와서 야야 야래 그들 드니 강갈 로바 좋도 그지 더가 이사 될 때는 야이 그수 뒤에서
So that wish, right, to lead all of those beings to perfect happiness, completely free from suffering by myself alone, that personal responsibility, infusing a realization of emptiness that is informed by hundreds of flawless reasonings, this becomes the causes of Anuttarak Samyak Sambodhi, the completely perfect body of a Buddha.
됐어요. 눈이 또 로 찌보가 내가지는 로나 녀모도 강가 매봐서 또 녀모가 빠져도 좀 와서 또요 말이스.
And this also relates to the fact that the wisdom realizing emptiness is an extremely powerful mind that can completely uproot the afflictions, but it cannot completely cleanse the imprints or the latencies left behind by those afflictions.
숑바도 니제 자와 집에 손주의 세티가 로빠지 소나. 다 녀모도 돈이 또 로딩 매봐서 그러 와서 빠져 좀 와서야 되고 기 로빠지 또 와서 괜찮아.
Yeah, so of course, love, compassion, and so forth, in this understanding, Geshe said it's a little bit of a paradox, a little bit to get our heads around, but love, compassion, and so forth, they cannot completely defeat the afflictions. It's this wisdom realizing emptiness that does that, and the infusion of the love and compassion is what kind of cleanses those imprints, those negative imprints or latencies left behind.
됐어요.
Did that answer your question, Sam?
Yes, I don't want to hold us up too much, but a follow-up question, and it might be too complex, and we can get to it maybe later. But
Yes, we'll give it a try. Let's see.
so then can we say that the form body of the Buddha, when it's complete and completely fulfilled, and the precious body, mind, and speech of the Buddha, it's completely realized. After the parinirvana, does that dissolve into a state that cannot come back into samsara to help beings? And
So I want to, just to get a good answer to your question, Sam, I want to confirm something with you because this will inform how Geshe understands the question. So are you asking that if someone has achieved all of the causes for the fulfillment of the Rupakaya, the form body, as well as the enlightened, fully enlightened body, speech, and mind of a Buddha in a certain lifetime, but then they pass away into parinirvana, does this mean that they can never return to this human world? Is that what you're asking?
yeah, and at the same time, can we say that because the latencies of the Pratyeka Buddhas are not completely annihilated, that they don't go into parinirvana?
Okay. Yeah.
And they have to return back to work on the latencies?
I see. Okay. Yep. Okay. I got your question. Okay. Trua tambo dires. Nganso dru papo nyamlen chegendi rua ko suku drubia gigyu chatsangwa sane dene ko ku sange gi ku sun tu gi netsu chatsangwa drub tubia gigyu satsares. Yine ko migi tsupo nangla dua di jiten yope kapula nyangen le dena dene ko sangegi shinjogores yine nyangen le dea de la tene ko nganso migi zambuling tsuryong tugi omares di chikche agoson ane nipadi rangya yena ko nyamlen yapochegi yores ane nyumongi dra mepaso tugi yores yine nyumongi bakshak dinso datong degiyores. Chetsang ko mi gizambuling tsuryongores karinsena ko mutune legi bakshak dinso sangmasogores. Koya di digirebes.
야야 다가래 니티도 루자 가리나 루자 단도키 루자 생도와스 다 루자 대지 갈래 오션지 셈벨로야 니도 마서는 코로 센 지용 그야 레스코라모
야 이네 ko migi zambuling tsuryong tugires ane sangedi zambuling tsuryong tugyo mares karin sena ko leka lakman menduas ko suku gineso chatsangwa drubsare duas dene leka lakman menduas chetsang tsuryong gyo mares ko chiwa dire tsochi
용기와레스 루자 타가레스 치코라자네 고 용거와스 다 손지 대지 당가서 가wan도난 대화요바 누이레스
So sort of half and half, Sam, which is that yes, when we think of the Pratyeka Buddha or the Shravaka, the hearer, right, these beings still have those latencies left behind. So at some point, they will be kind of aroused from that state of liberation, and they'll have to come back to this world and go along the bodhisattva path to reach that final goal of full enlightenment. So this is taught. However, we say that a being has been in this world, has accumulated all of the causes for the Rupakaya, for the form body, but also the enlightened body, speech, and mind of a completely perfect Buddha. And then they manifest parinirvana. And because of that, because they don't have any work left over, they don't return to the human realm. But that's not correct, because a Buddha can manifest emanation bodies whenever they wish to interact with beings in this realm.
꽤나 소지조 된된 좀을리도 그 기대 하고 살아와 아니 그수 야이 그수 뒤선 공만이 더 차와래 네가 기대 말이야
Yeah, so in the great vehicle understanding, of course, we understand that Buddha Shakyamuni was already enlightened prior to coming to this human world, and he manifested achieving enlightenment just for our benefit. But in the Mahayana understanding, he was actually already enlightened. So he came back to this human world to benefit. Same with Maitreya, right? He's already a completely enlightened Buddha, but when the time is right, he will manifest in this human world solely for the purpose of turning the wheel to benefit beings. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. But
You're welcome.
why did he have to be confused at first and be in a householder and then fulfill?
Shakyamuni, you mean?
Do you have to have a path so that it's fulfilled again? If he was already enlightened, why did he have to be born into the Shakya clan and then fulfill that path?
Dene Shakya tupa ngumane sangayana dene ko mitse di joya dan kange denso tuya dan akandis lagare chansa jaya dan puku kea dan kange tuya denso chasama karechene nyongu chungsung.
Mara tate ngaro so le tombi kala ndri chi yungare tane kala so lo yuzo nyole zo ndri chi yungare me jaro mo chi yuni mene su mduwas pena lo tu kawashena ngaro so tsendi tembo gogare shibi dachi sto.
So he manifested in this way to be able to show the beings of this world how they can practice right from the beginning, right? Not as someone who's already enlightened, but how they can practice right from the beginning and work through the study and practice to the various stages to eventually reach enlightenment. His Holiness the Dalai Lama explains it very succinctly, that the Buddha manifested in this way to demonstrate the great effort that is necessary for beings to realize liberation. Yeah, so Geshe says, here you find a difference between the Mahayana and the Theravada presentations of like who the Buddha was. Because in Theravada they don't say he was already enlightened, and for many people actually the Theravada may initially be more appealing, right? It may seem to make more sense. Yeah. So Geshe said, like, in a way it's like more inspiring, right? Like you think that the Buddha, he was just an ordinary person just like me. He had the same problems that I have, and he studied and he practiced, and in that way he was able to reach a state completely beyond suffering. That in a way can be really encouraging too, right?
But
the difficulty in this Theravada, in this Shravakyana presentation, is that once the Buddha achieves liberation, the consciousness is kind of blown out. It's extinguished. So then the Buddha is not still around to help us like he is in the Mahayana. So that's maybe, from that perspective, their way of understanding is more difficult. So there's a story of a great monk in Thailand who was widely regarded to be an arhat. And he said that, like, the Buddha's not gone, his consciousness isn't extinguished because I was able to encounter the Buddha and ask him questions, right? So even not all in Theravada are holding that view. So the Buddha manifesting like this, it's really to show ordinary beings like us how to progress along the path right from the beginning, and also to help give us faith or confidence that it is possible for an ordinary being to traverse the path to completion.
I can go rejoice in my confusion.
No, it's Sam, you're not confused. Like a lot in the English world, a lot of us are reading Theravada and Mahayana teachings, right? Sometimes, and so I think this is a common. People kind of get lost in the differences sometimes. Yeah. So yeah, slowly, it will come.
So I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Question asked in the Zoom chat by B. So the first line after the homage, conquerors of the mind lineage, Vidyadhara is the symbol lineage. Can Geshe explain a little bit about these two lineages?
Yeah, nganso tambo kandes laukare go tsuya di nganso kandes laukare gun ni yore sente dam menga de gyusum yore ro ane dene denso kepar kandes chikre sa.
다 대지 채워다 가르가르시 그러봐. 다 대지 자이 구베 집아서리다 라마치 지가 빙안조 노시시 먹어야지.
아하, 로소.
야, 다 리라고 돈은 줘야지. 다 드리네서.
지바 케제시에 고교 말했어.
다 계제시에나 유유마도 간조 노시다 아주잖아. 다 차수시 먹어야 줘야지.
Yeah, so Geshe said that he's not like completely sure, but he thinks that the former of these is a lineage of instruction that does not require many words. So it's something that can be transmitted very succinctly.
야이 군바세레 소소가 프레스를 소만 노지 바쇼 어디가 하고도야.
And so this unfolds through being able to kind of recognize the fundamental character of one's own mind, and it unfolds from that. Yeah.
그래서 아니 이제 다이 집아세레 that 제바 존지. 다세레 다 내스지 주주지 되나? 기텔라 되는 차소 하고도야.
And then another one is from a presentation of the second one is from a presentation of one understanding. One is able to have multifold understanding. So Geshe would say it's something like that. Yeah, and then the third one, the way of ordinary beings, is the way that most of us are going to be able to practice and understand the teachings. Yeah, and so this is likened to when the Buddha was absorbed in meditative equipoise on emptiness, but then he had to arise from that equipoise in response to questions from Manjushri, Shariputra, and so forth, in order to explain with more words the teaching. Yeah, so Geshe said that he's not like completely thoroughly familiar with this. I think it's really a Dzogchen thing actually, so he will look into this and try to give more details next time. Is there anything from socials, Dave?
Two questions or requests about Geshe offering the lung for both of these.
The lung for both of these, meaning
the Tsedo and yeah.
So what Facebook is asking for a lung for both the Tsedo and Words of My Perfect Teacher? Did I understand you?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Gain the Tsedo gilung dang kunzang lama jelung gilung ni nang tu girabesa. Yeah, so Geshe thinks yes. I mean, of course, Words of My Perfect Teacher is a little longer, but hopefully, yes, we'll get through all of this, and in this way, one receives a full lung, and the Sutra certainly. Yeah. Again, Shagin sik chatsang wajona lung chagire do achichana konsidi hako gyo
mare ta ko thi chagire was ta lung ga ro ka wani ro ya ta da ma ko chengdo yo me
Yeah, so Geshe says that the first thing that he has to do to make sure that he can say that it's really a lung of the longevity sutra that he's giving you, he has to check he has this recorded if he has received this properly himself. So there's the caveat there. He has to check to make sure he's received it. Yeah, was that everything? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
did you have a question?
It's regarding the question before about the two lineages.
Yeah.
What I heard you say there is that there were three. There were the two, multiple understandings and one understanding, and then ordinary beings.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but as far as I understood the question, she was asking about the first two. But yeah, Geshe gave all three, and the third is ordinary beings. That's
so correct. There are three lineages actually.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Chita gyun sum yore wa chogyun
Yeah,
sum
yeah,
yore
yeah.
ni den so den soso keo gyun double sumbadi chagire to ro.
Yeah.
Yes, yep, that's correct.
야,
That's
저 때가 저 단단 로데아테다.
Somebody
야, 나죠 버지. 야, 나이지 바실 마치 지 녀는 로야 들어.
So the third one is the one that we are practicing, which is those of ordinary beings who, hearing many different teachings, practice and practice and practice and then improve. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. And I'd also like to just add that I've put in behind me an image that was painted by a student of Jamyang in London of Geshe Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that you can go onto the Jamyang London site and make a donation for.
Yes, no, that's
Actually
beautiful.
very beautiful, and yeah.
And it comes in many sizes too. I have a beautiful postcard of this image. Yeah.
Well, actually, I negotiated with
Was
them.
that
and
from you? Yeah, sorry. That was a
I'm
gift
the
from
one.
you.
I'm the one who created it into a whole bunch of
Yeah.
different sizes, which is wonderful. So I got permission to do that,
Yeah,
and
Geshe
made a donation to Jamyang.
Yeah, Geshe says he keeps the postcard sized one on his shrine. Yeah, so we both have one of those. It's a very nice image. I think that's all our questions, right? So shall we leave it for today, and hopefully we'll see you next Sunday.
야,
Thank you so
저도
much.
대지 시고쳐 소소 차면은 소소소 요 이메 또나 로 이마들 때가로 또나 오 간저 시고차이라 와요.
Yeah, so Geshe said sometimes with the questions, if the answer wasn't completely clear to you, you can contact me, kedrup@lamayeshiling.org, and I can get more clarification from Geshe. And also, you can ask it in the second teaching. Sometimes Geshe can do a bit more research and find out more for you.
Oh, yeah, this so.
So let us leave it there and